Tonight's subject is the Galilee Basin, disastrous for the environment and the Great Barrier Reef. Jess Panegyres is a campaigner and a political advisor with Greenpeace Australia Pacific. She's from Western Australia, where she has seen the harmful impacts of climate change and the problems of a resource-dependent economy firsthand. Most recently, she led the Greenpeace team that told the truth to the World Heritage Committee about the Great Barrier Reef. So, welcome to our speakers.
Please join me again in another round of applause for not just Ella, but the AYCC. And I have to say, as someone who's just not quite young anymore, I turned 30 this year, I'm very excited that there is such a huge movement of young people out there, and they have taken on kind of the biggest fight in the country, and the momentum is with them, it's with us. It's really spine-tingling stuff. So thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet tonight and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We saw some very interesting and odd things happen in Parliament this week. As Ella pointed out, we saw the Attorney General, the Minister responsible for upholding Australians' laws, criticise citizens of Australia for seeking to have Australian law implemented. And as someone with a legal background, I found that quite extraordinary to see the Attorney General actually act against the rule of law. So I think what that shows is that we're living in very odd times. In fact, we're living in the end times for big coal. And that's the story that I want to take up from Ella tonight.
You vigilante.
So I might start with the personal side. I turned 30 this year, and in my lifetime we've seen 50% of the coral cover of the Great Barrier Reef disappear. The majority of indicators of the reef's health are in decline. Now, this is not just an Australian treasure. This is a global treasure. When the World Heritage Committee listed the Great Barrier Reef on the World Heritage list, it said if only one coral reef in the whole world was World Heritage, it would be the Great Barrier Reef. It is of superlative beauty. It is of superlative biodiversity value. We in Australia are sitting on a jewel of the world. At the same time, we are in the critical decade for tipping climate change, as Ella pointed out. But the world is on a trajectory towards overshooting that guardrail. Now, the Galilee Basin is one of the biggest carbon bombs in the world, as Ella pointed out, and I won't repeat. If we let that coal get dug up and burnt, not only will that coal travel to the coast of the Great Barrier Reef, not only will ports be expanded, which requires the dredging up of the seafloor, destroying seagrass, dugong habitat, that coal will then be shipped through the Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area. There it will be burnt, and it will drive dangerous climate change, which the scientists tell us is the greatest long-term threat to the Great Barrier Reef. For us, it was a no-brainer as well. There was no way in hell we were going to let that happen. And back in 2012, as Ella has said, there were 9 megamines proposed. And I can't actually fit in 25 minutes, the story of all the incredible people that rose up to oppose the opening up of the Galilee Basin. The Wangan and Jagalingou people who did not want the mine built on their lands. The local conservation groups who did not want to see their little patch of the reef dredged and the sediment destroy the coral in their area. The big environmental groups, the Australian Marine Conservation Society, scientists from around the world and around the country, 350 taking on the banks, AYCC doing an incredible job of taking on Lend-Lease and the banks. But what's been really interesting about this is what we were up against. And it was bipartisan. The previous Labor government wanted the Galilee Basin to go ahead. The current coalition government want the Galilee Basin to go ahead. the biggest bank in Australia, wanted the Galilee Basin to go ahead. Some of the biggest banks in the world, including Standard Chartered, wanted the Galilee Basin to go ahead. And everything we tried to stop it failed initially. And I think it's really important to point out that we have environmental protection laws in this country that you cannot use to stop a project on climate grounds, even though it is the biggest environmental threat in Australia today. The Wangan and Jagalingou people cannot use the native title system to veto a mining proposal on their land. They cannot say no, they have no legal rights. So I think we're painting a picture of the incredible power of the system, which is essentially geared towards approving big new mining projects. So, then what happened in the intervening time? I think what I will talk about a little bit is the kind of global aspect of the finance work, because what was clear is that in a context in which there's bipartisan political support for this project, we weren't going to win it in Canberra, we weren't going to win it in Queensland, so we went straight to the banks. Standard Chartered was one of the two banks that we knew were involved in the project. And this is one of the biggest banks in the world. It has its headquarters in London and it's a commercial shopfront bank in East Asia. So we did what we always do. We're very polite at the start. We write to the company and we say, excuse me, not sure if you know, but you're invested in a project that's going to destroy the Great Barrier Reef and tip us over the 2-degree guardrail on climate change. We'd probably prefer that you didn't do that. And they didn't reply. So our UK office said, okay, fine, we'll take it to the streets. So they did a couple of direct communications where they went to the Standard Chartered headquarters. They had folks on the ground, volunteers outside, handing out leaflets. They had folk inside asking questions of the Standard Chartered CEO. And the CEO said something really interesting at that AGM. He said, okay, we're going to halt our involvement in the project until we've done our own internal environmental audit. And then we heard nothing. But we found out that what Standard Chartered was really worried about was their East Asian markets. So Greenpeace in Hong Kong, Greenpeace in Taipei got involved. They went out to all of the different branches of Standard Chartered. They leafleted, they put up signs on AGMs, they went to their headquarters. At the same time, we had cyber actions targeting the CEOs of the company. We had petitions, and we were having the secret negotiations behind the scenes. And about a week after CommBank announced that they were no longer involved in the project, a week after the Mackay Conservation Group won their appeal, Standard Chartered announced that they would no longer be involved in the project either. And I can't even begin, as I said, to pay tribute to all of the different citizens and groups that have gone towards that incredible result. But what I do want to talk about now is the backlash. So in 3 weeks, we've seen Big Coal and its buddies hit back. And they say that when a beast is cornered, that's when it's at its most ferocious. And that's what we've seen. So on the day of the Mackay Conservation Group win, and remember that was a win that said the Environment Minister has not followed environmental law, therefore the decision should be ruled invalid. And as a matter of law, that is a proper result. And on that same day, all of the big coal companies, including Adani, including Peabody, all came out and said the law should be changed. Tony Abbott said the law should be changed. The Attorney General said the law should be changed. And to go back a little step, when we wrote to UNESCO and said we think the reef should be listed in danger on the grounds that the science says it is in danger and on the grounds that the government is putting it in greater threat by pushing ahead with their plans for Galilee Coal, 2 days after we told Greg Hunt that that's what we had done, he launched an inquiry into the charitable status of environmental groups. And we know that this is a political witch hunt designed to silence dissent, because that is what this government does not want. We also saw a huge backlash against Greenpeace in India because we were targeting Adani, an Indian company over here. We know that that had huge implications for our Indian colleagues. Greenpeace India was shut down. All funds from foreign supporters were frozen. Their offices were raided. People were arrested. We've seen a huge backlash. Why? Why do they care so much? Why is our government choosing to prioritise big coal and their mates in a declining industry over this huge alliance of people, from traditional custodians to locals to big environmental groups to legal groups? Why do they care so much? And I think this is where we get to the scary bit. They haven't developed a plan B. They don't know how we are going to justly transition away from a fossil fuel dependent economy towards an economy of the future that is diverse, that is sustainable, that is good for people and good for the planet. And that is what we need to demand of our politics. That is what we must demand of our leaders. Because until we have a plan B, they're going to keep on struggling. They're going to keep on being backed against that corner and lashing out with every tool at their disposal. Most Australians want sustainable jobs. They want fresh air, they want clean water, they want clean spaces for their kids. They want a balanced and resilient and smart economy. And we share that sort of cherished ambition that our kids and their kids will have clean air, they'll have jobs, they'll have places to play. A nation perpetually reeling from cyclones, floods, fires and droughts, struggling with food security and mass climate migration in a drastically more unstable world, will find it difficult to prosper. It's hard to see how Australians can hope to be healthier, better educated, more productive, or more content in a world of climate chaos. But the good news is that the momentum is with us. It is with organised people working together to protect the planet against the full force of the elite political and corporate power holders who are pulling out all the stops to support this one last coal basin, this mega coal basin in Australia. And this is an extraordinary example of Australians and the concerned global community coming together and taking every little bit of power that we all have, putting it together and showing that we can take on some of the biggest companies, some of the biggest banks, the top brass in our country, and the momentum is with us. So we have to seize this momentum and, as Ella said, not just win the Galilee Basin, we have to win a better future for all of us and our kids and their kids after that. Thank you very much.